came to Lamar, they didn't have anything in game development 4 years ago. Now they do. My presentation is titled Southeast Texas Interactive Media Career Market Research. And what that means is that we are doing a study to analyze the perception of students and teachers in particular about the video game industry, and especially as it relates to their academic and professional lives or choices in the case of students. I am doing this with help from Charles Bray and Josh Wilson, who are not present today. And I'm getting mentored by quite a bunch of faculty from across various departments due to the multidisciplinary nature of the field. I'm going to talk about what we did, how we did it, why we did it, and what we plan to do with the research and after. So what we did was basically that, what I already stated, that we analyzed the perception of the industry in Southeast Texas. We went out and invited 14 school districts and 4 private schools to have their middle schools and high schools participate in our survey, from which we were successfully able to survey 5 school districts which responded. Our surveys were for students from 7th to 12th grade who spoke 6th grade English or higher. And we collected data from 1,600 students. Actually, we have a little bit more now, using SurveyMonkey. Here are a couple of examples of the questions that we asked to the students, middle schools and high school students. We asked them things like whether they think that the video game industry has limited jobs, or whether they think Texas is involved in the industry, whether they talk about the industry in school, or whether they want to learn more about the industry. We also have 2 other surveys, one for Lamar students and one for faculty. And that's because Dr. Das, one of my mentors, he suggested doing that, not just serving the schools, but also the Lamar. So here, most of the questions are the same for the 3 surveys, but some differ depending on the population. So for the college students, some questions different to the ones of middle school and high school students are, for example, whether the industry is relevant to their major, or what they think the salary is of a game developer, and related questions. For faculty, we ask questions like whether the industry is relevant to their work, whether they have encountered it in their work, and whether they would support students that pursue that industry. Dr. Kirk has been helping us analyze the data we got using chi-square statistics, and with those analyses, we were able to come up with, some of the findings we have so far are, for example, that our findings suggest that only 1 out of 4 students have considered the game industry as a possible venue for a career. And from those, 3 out of 8 boys and 1 out of 8 girls are likely to have considered the industry. So girls are 3 times less likely, more or less, and about 5 out of 9 students have not considered the industry as a possible career venue. Girls being more likely to not have considered it. Also, only 1 out of 10 students have been encouraged by school or family. Girls being, again, 3 times less likely to have been encouraged to pursue the industry. 7 out of 10 students said they have not been encouraged. And from those, 8 out of 10 girls and 6 out of 10 boys. So we are looking at gender comparisons. We're going to look at other comparisons as well, but for now we only have the gender. Only 2 out of 10 students said they are likely to pursue a career in the game industry, in or related to. Girls are far less likely than boys to pursue a career in the video game industry. And we also looked at the popularity of game genres. So For example, we found out that the most popular was shooter and military, with 64% listing that genre. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have browser-based and educational games at the bottom. That's actually consistent with one of my predictions, that because one of the main reasons I'm doing this research is to support more push for educational video games. And one of my predictions was that serious games or educational games are not popular. And this is consistent with that. Also, here are some of the highlights of that. The most popular was shooter military, also among boys. The least popular was browser-based games in overall. Action adventure was the most popular among girls, but they were still outnumbered by boys. And serious educationals were the least popular among boys, but they were not popular with girls either. Now, why we're doing this? We want to find out, one of our main goals is to find out how many students might be interested in the industry, and that's because we are pushing for Lamar to get more involved in the industry. So we want to find out how many students Lamar is missing out on by not offering the opportunities in that industry. As well as we want to find out how well informed are they, because we predict that there is misinformation or maybe even bias in the students. The tech parents wherever possible. Such findings can help in increasing the awareness about the industry, battling possible biases and market stigmas, aiding in curricular, educational, and professional development, as well as aiding in game design, particularly towards game-based learning and educational games. So what we plan to be doing next is hopefully collaborate with other groups and organizations, and these ones are just examples of some that I'm considering and I'm actually reaching out to. Games for Ed was formed in January. They came together in DC to form the organization. And this is exactly what they're doing, the use of games for education on all frontiers. And I think that's it. Do you have any questions?
Speak a little bit about how gaming could be used in an educational context. Sort of, what's your vision for using game technology to enhance student learning, for example?
Yes, and that's a great question, because that hits right in the center of why I'm doing this research. And maybe I will come from a personal perspective here, but ever since I was a little kid, I have always liked games, and I have always spent a lot of time playing games. So much so that I play games and I learn a lot about the game, like the content of the game, which in most cases is irrelevant to real life, and it's fantasy or things that do not apply. And when I was in middle school, I became addicted to a game, and I played so much that suddenly I had the thought, if school was this fun and this engaging, I would be like Einstein, like so smart, because I spent so much time in it. But also, what if the content that I'm learning about in the game was relevant and useful? And that's totally doable. So why isn't it being done? And that's the question that has been bothering me ever since.
Has anybody looked at the kind of the various entertainment values in different types of games? So like color, movement, like I don't know what makes a video game addictive, but if they could figure that out and look at the proportion of those things that are in some games versus educational games, my sense is that educational games are much less interesting to, like Candy Crush, even though it's meaningless, is gorgeous visually. Especially the better your browser, the better your phone is, the better you notice this is really pretty. And probably most of the educational games don't have some of those things, and we understand what draws people into games.
That's also another very important question.
Yeah.
The other day, I attended a webinar. Yeah. I think it was titled Introduction to Game-Based Learning or something like that. game-based learning, and the webinar was presented by Matthew Farber. He's an expert in the field, and he wrote a book called "Gamify the Classroom" or something like that. I might be missing a few words. And it's a research book where it's meant to be a field guide. And in the webinar, he touched on the topic of how educational games or serious games, well-made ones, should be really addictive, should be really engaging, because, and I think he didn't mention this, but what I think is that the learning process is natural to every healthy human being, and for me, in an ideal society, the words learning and playing should be synonyms. Because if you look at animals, for example, and you look at the baby animals, they play because that's how they develop. So it's no different for games and video games. And so he touched on that, and he said, games that are designed with education and psychological development in mind are, in theory at least, better than games who are just made just to sell or just to be fun, without really looking at, okay, what does it really mean for something to be fun? Which, from my perspective, is what I'm just saying. For something to be fun, it's because it's tapping to a motivation, which learning is actually in the one of the game development classes that are being offered here at Lamar now, called Introduction to Game Development. We look at precisely one chapter. We look into player motivation, and so there's different player motivations. There's competition, there's mastery, there is press your luck, and there's these various different kinds of sources of motivation. So that a game developer, a game designer has to look at all this and be, okay, what do I want my game to be the motivation source? And it can be more than one. But of course, the more kinds of motivations that you put into the game, the more hard it is to design it and to make it actually effective. But it's along the lines of that.
Yeah, I was actually gonna add that when I was doing research for our research is on novelty, and I was looking at a study that was about Facebook gaming. They were looking at what made people completely engage in certain games versus other games. And one of the biggest predictors that people would actually buy games, like, you know, you can have like trial versions and then you buy upgrades for them or whatever, was actually novelty. Yeah. So basically, think of like getting loot, unexpected loot, that's better than you would anticipate. There's no way to know exactly what you would get, so you just keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. So novelty was one of the things that showed to be a pretty significant predictor of people being fully engrossed in games and predicted their buy of them games. Yeah. So.
And if you think about, for instance, Candy Crush Online Game Competition, one of the things that's appealing is that every time you get to a new level, there's a new set of challenges. So you sort of mastered it in the last 10, but now there's this new curve they threw you, which rebooks you. It's like, this isn't routine anymore. Now you have to figure out new things.
As you're saying that, I'm trying to recall all the list of the different kinds of motivation. And I think for the most part, the one that you mentioned is mastery. And the one that you mentioned is, I think it might be press your luck, or there's another name for it, but it actually might be two combined. And there's also sociability is one motivation, as well as what was it, physical isolation or escapism or something like along that line.
You should get involved with them. Yeah. This is really yeah.
So, thanks.